Hi, I'm Shashi Kiran, Chief Go-to-Market Officer of a company called Nile. Well, Nile's a young, innovative startup based out of the Bay Area. It was founded by John Chambers, Pankaj Patel, and a lot of people that end up building the infrastructure for the internet. And these were, as you know, the CEO and the CDO of Cisco. And the whole premise of Nile was to say, hey, how do we kind of take a look at on-premises environments, local area networks, where there's a tremendous amount of operational complexity, and really look at a new model in terms of delivering security there for organizations that don't necessarily have a lot of IT resources there. So, think about university campuses, warehouses, bank branches, hospitals, you name it, right? So the whole premise of Nile was to really look at a very foundational technology with a lot of built-in security, but also something that vastly reduces the operational complexity and brings a very predictable cost structure. So we call this a Secure Network as a Service, or Secure NaaS. So talking about Secure NaaS a bit, I want to just address why this notion of network as a service. And if you think about it, there is a lot of complexity involved in terms of this box-by-box configuration model, whether it's shipping, whether it's manual provisioning, whether it's troubleshooting, the whole 9 yards. And if you look at contrasting that with the data center and the cloud, you see a lot of infrastructure that is ready to be consumed as resource pools to be delivered as a service. And we have seen that same trend happen in the wide area network environments as well, with security, with zero trust, with SASE, which brings together network and network security. But when you look at on-campus, on-premises environments in the local area, it's still an architecture from the 1990s. There's a lot of manual, box stacking involved. There's a lot of individual management constructs for each one of them. So it's incredibly complex, and that means inherently when you bring in complexity, it reduces the ability to secure it. It's very hard. Complexity is in some ways the number one attack vector if you look at it. And it also leads to cost escalations. And I think the whole notion of Secure NaaS is to look at fundamentally a very different type of architecture, which is built taking away a lot of these complexity, whether it's protocols, whether it's this box-by-box stacking, and bring things in for the here and now, and make it secure by design with cloud-delivered services, with autonomous operations, with the ability for customers who may not have large IT organizations spread out everywhere to be able to have the visibility and the control. So it's a different architecture, and so we're sort of a vendor that's developing this technology, but we've also brought in autonomous operations because we want to look at taking advantage of AI across the entire life cycle, planning and design with day zero, deployment and optimization with day one, and then day 2 through N, where you're essentially operating it, and see how much can you offload into AI, how much can you take away through innovative design, and bring in that simplicity. And so that is something that makes more robust, performant environments, but it also reduces the threat exposure, reduces the attack surface. And whether you look at IT, OT, all of these become vastly simpler. So we think this combination of Secure NaaS, which is with zero trust foundationally baked into the architecture, and this notion of autonomous services with AI, and the ability to deliver services really leads to the business agility of the organization. And we're kind of unique in that aspect in terms of how we've architected and how we deliver it. If you think about why this architecture is inherently different, look at the status quo across the rest of the industry. On one hand, you have traditional, box vendors or technology vendors, but they don't go deliver a service. They give it to the IT department of an organization, or they can hand it off to an MSP or a telco, and they stitch the services around it. And it's usually a 2 or 3 step value chain in terms of the innovation versus the services that are delivered. And each step in some ways adds to complexity. And when something goes wrong, there's a lot of troubleshooting overhead involved, because the entity that's delivering the service doesn't own the technology, and the entity that's developing the technology doesn't own the service. So this is really the problem statement or the status quo that Nile tried to address, where we brought in the technology, but a lot of the service delivery through the operational aspects of the life cycle are also well thought out and integrated into the design of the architecture itself. So when I talked about the technology, I also talked about autonomous operations, and these two are usually ships in the night with the traditional environment. And what we have done is brought these two in and made it foundational in terms of how the technology and the service delivery and the operations are constructed. So now let's take a look at what kind of outcomes can you deliver. One is when it's secure by design, you don't need multiple appliances. Zero trust is baked in. And in some ways, we brought in data center class security into the branch and campus environments, which is a hard thing to do just by virtue of the way the whole architecture has been designed ground up with zero trust. So it reduces risk, and it reduces the amount of things that you need to deal with to secure something. You don't need multiple NAC appliances, multiple other devices, each with their own management constructs. The second thing is really how you look at SaaS, and can you bring SaaS-like agility into delivering this infrastructure on premises. And so it leads to faster change management, better business agility for the organizations. The C-levels really like it because it allows them to transform their organizations much faster. And the third is, you're delivering it as a service, as a subscription, and it makes cost structure very predictable. And you don't need to worry about these 5 to 7 year refreshes where you have to go spike on CapEx spend. This is an operational spend, very predictable cost structure. And typically, customers that come with Nile versus the status quo model where you're spending $1 on technology but $5 to $10 on operational aspects, they see a huge amount of saving, 50 to 70% cost savings, but it's also very predictable. So these are the outcomes that we're driving. And for enterprises, typically, the branch and campus organizations are really where their real estate footprint is. This is where their employees are. This is where their devices are, including OT and IT. And so that's the attack surface. That's the productivity surface that we're addressing. And I think those are the outcomes that we want to drive.